Good morning, grade 9s. I hope that you are all doing well under these difficult circumstances. I really miss being in the classroom with you. By the end of next week, we are going to start doing video conferencing, which at least will give us the opportunity to see each other and talk and communicate in that fashion as well. So what I wanted to do today was just finish off our discussion on the immune system. We didn't quite finish everything, and this will be the last topic on microbiology. Now, we are no longer going to have a test, a written test. We are just going to consider your labs that you did along with your presentations as being enough of an evaluation in this unit. So there's one positive thing for not being actually in class. Okay. So we talked about this pretty quickly, I think, and I don't even know if all of you were there, so I just kind of want to finish this off. So we're looking now at applications of the immune system. So first of all, we're looking at something called immunity. Now, immunity means that you will not be able to be infected or even affected by the pathogen. It could be anything, right? But anything that comes into your body and is foreign, right? Okay, so there's different ways to acquire this immunity. Now, the first way is passive. Now, what kind of classifies passive is that it is short-term and you're not actually creating memory cells. Remember we talked about B and T memory cells and how they circulate around the blood, and they protect you from different pathogens as long as it basically remembers, and then it will elicit a response quickly if if you're infected with that again. So this would be short term, and also instead of actually getting memory cells, you get something called antibodies. And we did talk about these as well. They're earlier in the unit. Remember, they're kind of Y-shaped. I remember I had a stuffy of it and I passed it around to you guys. And what they do in theory is they will surround the invading pathogen and basically prevent it from doing harm to your body. Now, how do you actually get this passive immunity? You can get it through naturally, and an example would be through the placenta. So when the baby's actually inside, these antibodies will pass through the placenta into the baby, and it protects them for a short amount of time. Another example, and this is kind of a weird one, would be artificial. So if you actually you have a blood transfusion and take the antibodies and put it into your blood, for example, with snake venom, and it will prevent the snake venom from killing you, but it's not going to prevent you from, if you were to get bitten by a snake again, you wouldn't be fine, right? You would have to do that same procedure again. Interestingly enough, actually, they're using the antibodies right now. That's one of the things they're trying to do with the COVID-19 is they are trying to get a hold of these antibodies from people who have recovered because they produce them in their blood, and they're trying to use those to try to treat people who have this disease. Okay, active. In an active immunity here, this is actually going to be more long-term, and you are actually having the production of memory cells that will be circulating your blood for a certain amount of time. Now, you can gain it naturally by actually having the infection if you're infected with some type of virus, or you can get a vaccination for it as well. Both of them will elicit an immune system response and will produce memory cells. Okay, I showed you this, and this was just an example of the immunization schedule for Ontario. You can see here the ages of when these are actually going to be given, and then these are all the different diseases, right, that you're actually, if you have been vaccinated, and you guys would be probably somewhere in here, right? You guys would be vaccinated basically with all of these different things up to this point. The way it works is that every time you get a small amount of the vaccine, which is actually the dead or it could even be a slightly alive organism. Your immune system, this is supposed to represent the immune system eliciting a response. And notice, the more you get the vaccine, the small amount, eventually you will acquire immunity to it. So if you were to come in contact with it, you would not be affected by it. All right, this is where we kind of left off, and I wanted to get into more detail about this. So allergic reactions. Now, what actually are allergic reactions? Well, it's the immune system out of control. And for some reason, some people have a hypersensitive immune system, which means that all of these things, these are just some different examples of, there's many of them, but these are kind of the most common ones. And these are not harmful most of the time, right? But your body, for some reason, thinks that they are harmful. Now, this is the one what we left off at. My dog just walked in and opened the door, so I just closed the door, sorry. This is the one that we left off at. And I want to go through now what's actually happening inside the immune system to cause this reaction. All right. So first of all, what are the cells that are involved? B cells. Now, if you recall back, okay, what a B cell does, again, is when B cells are triggered, all right, by a helper T cell, what they will do is they will create a plasma cell. Now, plasma cells will then make antibodies. And then these are what I was just talking about before, right? So this is actually happening when we are looking at allergies. Now, what happens? This is actually really cool. I find this fascinating. So here is the allergen. So the allergen could be any of the things we just talked about, okay? So let's go with pollen. So let's just say you're walking through the forest and it's pollen season. And pollen, you breathe in the pollen and you have no reaction because you've never been allergic before. So the pollen will come in and it will attach to receptors that are on the surface of a B cell. Now, the B cell for some reason thinks, oh, this is harmful. So what it does is it differentiates or changes into a plasma cell, as you can see here. And what is it releasing? What are those called again? Those are antibodies. Now, the antibodies then, and now this is where, all right, just bear with me, okay? Where do these antibodies go? Well, if you recall, earlier in the unit, we were talking about this special type of cell called a mast cell. Mast cells were also called basophil cells, and what they're responsible for is releasing histamine during a time when you were injured. So we go back for a moment. Okay, do you remember this? All right, so this is if you were injured, and here is supposed to be you got stabbed by a pencil or something horrible like that. And what happens is the platelets will come up and you won't be bleeding out anymore. But notice number 3 here. So mast cells release histamine. And this histamine causes the dilation of the blood vessels so that all your white blood cells can come in and it can kill off the bacteria that may have come in with the wound. Remember, it uses phagocytosis to eat it, or it will get rid of damaged tissue. So all of that is good, and mast cells are really important in the body. Not ideal in this situation with somebody who has a hyperactive immune system. So notice what's happening here with the mast cell. The antibodies that are being released attach to the surface, okay, of this mast cell. And at this point now, you have created these cells, but there are no symptoms. Okay, so symptoms for allergies, for if you've ever or if you're allergic to pollen, you may or may, hopefully you're not because it's a pain, but you get really itchy eyes, a runny nose, etc. Now, let's just say you're walking through the forest again, breathing in the pollen, and you now have these cells produced. This time when the allergen comes in, it's going to attach to the receptors, which were the antibodies that were produced that are now attached to the mast cell. And what happens here? It causes the release of histamine. Now, this histamine in this situation is not a positive thing, because what it does, I'll go back, is it causes your the itchy eyes, the runny nose, etc. And that's the body's reaction to the histamine being released. Now, a pollen allergy is annoying, but as we know, now in society, we have so many people who are so severely allergic to different things that they need to have an EpiPen. So, what are some of the things that happens with people who have this scenario? Okay, sorry, I just wanted to check something. All right, so first of all, for when you are in this situation, you have way too much histamine. So somebody who has a severe allergic response to the point where they can die is because there's too much histamine being released all at once. So its whole body is releasing this histamine. Now, for example, what are some things that you might see with somebody who is what we call an anaphylactic shock? Their face, right, could be itchy, red, and swelling. They could have difficulty breathing, coughing, wheezing, pain in the stomach, vomiting, diarrhea. And then it could be lots of other things, just kind of total body, hives, rash, etc. Now, just to give you kind of an example, my oldest son, Matthew, has a tree nut shellfish allergy. The first time we ever found out, he was 4 years old, and we gave him, my mom actually gave him a turtle chocolate. And honestly, I've never seen anything like it. It was instantaneous reaction. His face was swelling so badly. He didn't have any actually of these symptoms. He didn't have trouble breathing or coughing, but he did all of these things. His stomach was really irritated, and he ended up getting hives, which is like these blotchy things all over his body. So we took him to the hospital, and they told us that he was having an allergic reaction, and what the treatment was Benadryl. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever taken Benadryl. I don't think I spelled that right. There's no Z in it. Benadryl is an antihistamine. So if you think opposite, right, it's trying to get rid of the histamine out of the body, right? So it's basically a chemical reaction that is reversing the reaction of the histamine. So with someone who is anaphylactic, it's not enough, right? That's the treatment for it. And you can actually use Benadryl for all other treatments as well, for all these things back here, right? They're helpful, the Benadryl, for other things. But if someone is actually anaphylactic, you need the EpiPen. Now, EpiPen contains adrenaline, and when you actually stab the person with the needle with the adrenaline in it, it keeps them alive. It keeps their heart beating, etc. Because one of the things that typically happens with an anaphylactic shock is that the heart can be overwhelmed and the blood pressure can drop, and then the person can die and actually go into a coma. So that's why it's so important that people, who have these allergies are always carrying EpiPens. All right, well, that's all I have to say for today. We are now finished our unit. I will give you guys some more instructions on what's going to be happening next week, along with the Science Odyssey. So I'm going to actually send that by email. All right, take care. Hope you guys are all well.